by this amazing and engaged audience. And I was thinking, oh my, do I really have anything to add to this conversation? Well, I did prepare some stuff. So I hope so. Just a little bit of background on myself. I am not an expert in diversity and inclusion per se. I've only been working in this field for about a year. And I came over from Sweden 22 years ago and discovered Silicon Valley and thought, whoa, what a great place to work. And I thought I was going to work in human resource or with organizational behavior, but I ended up working in tech. And after my first job, I was part of starting up a company that we flipped after a couple of years to Autodesk. And then I was part of starting up an enterprise software company, competing with the NetApp lady over here. She's not in the room, so. oh, shit, she's there. Anyway, so NetApp was one of our biggest competitors. But we, after 15 years of running that company, I was the president and COO, we sold it to Citrix a couple of years ago. Yes, whoa, wow, I did it. We did it, it was amazing. And it was a long journey and it was really hard. And I was very much heads down, focusing on work and on family. And I have to say and admit that while I lived in Boston for 17 years, I didn't make a lot of friends there. My friends were in all corners of the world, but because when I was home, I was always with the children. I have 3. And so when I entered the company that acquired us, I had not for 20 years really even thought about that I was a woman in tech. I did think about it when I was pregnant with my 3rd, and my entire being was screaming when we had to go into a conference room and there were only guys in there. My hormones just didn't agree with that. So in our office, I simply asked them to move the conference table out into the main room, and everybody else had to go into the conference room when we were having board meetings. So we solved it that way. But with the experience of going into the big company, all of a sudden I was like, oh, whoa, is this how they treat women these days? Is this really right? And I asked the organization, I said, what do we have going on for women? Do we have any support groups? Is there any networks? Is there anything going on? And they said, yeah, we have a potluck at Christmas. It was May. So I thought, okay, well, this is just not going to be good enough. So after my year there, I decided that I wanted to do something. I started running to women's networking events, meeting with a lot of people. I've made like 400 new contacts in the last year. Amazing people, very, very talented across the board. And I realized that all these women's events, there wasn't a single guy. And I was like, whoa, that's really weird. I come from a man's world, I know who makes the decisions, and here are all these women sitting around talking about how to advance to leadership without talking to the guys. So I started talking to some men, and I said, well, if I organize Women in Tech, an event for guys, will you come? And they said, yeah, sure, absolutely, we'll come. Then I came across Ray Arata and the Better Man Conference, and one thing led to the next. So I've actually been building out the network of male allies quite a bit. But to get to the topic, let's see, that we're going to be discussing today. The metoo movement, when I started a year ago, as it happens, it was actually, my first conference was on the 19th of October. And that was exactly the same day that Alyssa Milano wrote her big article and called out to all women to start using the MeToo hashtag for any time that they had been sexually abused or harassed. And then I started understanding that that wasn't, it wasn't like a novelty or anything like that. In 2006, Tarana Burke, she coined that phrase as well. And she did it to give a voice to young women from underrepresented groups that had been abused or harassed in any way or form. And that was big in itself, but because of social media, it really became bigger in 2017 when Alyssa Milano did it. And she wanted to just shed some light on the magnitude of this problem. What I'm going to try to do today is to translate it into the workplace. Like, how do we create, coming from the Me Too movement, how do all of us create a sustainable movement that can move us forward together, that can actually help us to create a more productive and creative environment in the workplace with improved results. So, here, I'm going to launch myself out on a limb, and if this panel here hadn't been here, I would sound like a real pro. But I'm not claiming to be a pro, but I want to talk to you about the things that I've been thinking a lot about. I created something that I call the crime misconduct scale. It's based on conversations that I've had with people over the years in the industry, any women or anybody who feels like they have been sexually harassed or abused. So this is not scientific. It's just meant to trigger thought and to encourage further research. First, on the x-axis, and now I know that there's justification from this, from the previous panel. On the x-axis, we have the assault and harassment, from quid pro quo on the left to invisible harassment on the right. And now I can tell you what the percentages are. I couldn't have done that 20 minutes ago. When I thought about quid pro quo and the stories that I've heard, I think of full pay, no reward, full pay, full reward, to physical harassment, to verbal harassment, and to invisible harassment. And when I talk about the full pay, the full pay, no reward, I mean sleep with me and I'll give you a job. I sleep with you, you don't give me the job. That's pretty bad. Then the full pay, full reward would be, go down on me, you're going to get a promotion. I go down on you, and you do give me a promotion. Those are kind of like the most extreme. And as we learned, there's only 8% of women that are experiencing this kind of stuff. But when it comes to verbal abuse or verbal harassment, ongoing stuff, like I would go into this guy's office every so often during the years of working in my own company and say, okay, it's time for trade show. Oh, great, so you're going to get into your white latex again. Yeah. Ha, 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 ha. How did I deal with it? Well, that's a different story. We're not going to discuss that. So what determines the level of severity of the crime misconduct is really the laws, the societal norms, and our moral values. So on the scale 1 to 10, I've just determined that 10 is the most severe and 1 is the least severe. And it's kind of based on facts. As a matter of fact, it's the laws, the norms, the values. It's controlled, it's categorizable, and it's an intellectual scale. We can all relate to that. Sounds great. But then along comes the metoo movement, like a shockwave. And all of these women's stories come out. Every single woman is standing up and saying, I have experienced this. But they don't just tell you what they have done or what they've experienced. They're actually telling you about how they feel and what emotions were attached to this. And so all of a sudden, this crime misconduct scale just totally goes out the window. All of a sudden, offenders of all industries, starting with media and venture capital and government, they get judged and punished, not just based on the misconduct, but on the emotions that they've created within their victims. And that has never happened at least not in the tech space before. So instead, I changed things around a little bit. And I thought a step further. I created something that I call the pain-suffering scale. And as you can see, on the y-axis, you have exactly the same thing that we had on the previous picture. You have the quid pro quo, to the physical harassment, to the verbal harassment, to the invisible harassment. And I've kept the numbers of pain levels from 1 to 10. But instead, we have the victim's individual interpretation of the harassment and assault that determines the severity of the pain and suffering. And so it's not necessarily so that the pain and suffering correlates with the severity of what we saw in the previous slide, the crime. It could actually be that I'm experiencing a quid pro quo situation, and that is really, really bad for me. It's like an 8 or a 10. And then a woman who's grown up in a totally different kind of environment than I have, and with totally other beliefs and a totally other family situation, for her, it's going to be just as painful when she experiences the verbal harassment. And it also varies from day to day, from woman to woman, from situation to situation. So the variables are very, very many. And you can see that the pink line that I drew straight out of number 9, it kind of goes down a little bit on the right-hand side. I did that because I believe that there's a greater variety of women's emotions when it comes to the softer type of harassment. While when we're on the extreme side, it's pretty much consistent across the board. We feel angry, we feel frustrated with the imbalance of power, we feel anxiety, we feel offended, we're scared. So, regardless of all of this, I think that this is the first time that the voices of the victims are really helping us to determine what's wrong or what's right and how wrong things are. So, while again, this is not scientific, I think we can all agree that it throws all the logic that we've ever known up until now out the window. It's uncategorized, it's uncontrollable, and it's creating tremendous confusion for those who are used to being in power and feeling that they have things under control. So no matter how small or how big the harassment is, every story deserves to be heard and seen. I want to add one more last thing, which Dr. Pryor also kind of helped me to clarify that it actually exists. On the left-hand side of that greenish line that you see in the middle, I think that most men, and I'm generalizing, I'm sorry about that, but I think that most guys think that the quid pro quo, they kind of know in their gut that that's really wrong and they shouldn't be doing that. But on the right-hand side, where it's verbal or invisible harassment, it's kind of a gray zone. And they don't really think about, maybe they know that it's not right to do it, but they don't understand the consequences. They don't understand the pain that they're causing by doing it. So anyway, so this is my, this was my sort of journey on trying to figure out why are the dynamics changing so much, and what can we do about that? And I want to learn from all of this. I'm just trying to take the thinking one step further. I want to learn from it, and I would like to create this kind of productive movement going forward. And I want to think about how we all relate to this in the workplace. So here are some other things that we have touched upon today. All the different spotty and individual initiatives that everybody's working on right now are really, really good. We have a person providing training. We've got people providing women's groups. We have men allies and so on. But before I talk about what is required to create sort of a forceful movement going forward, I think that there's a few things that we're trying to do right now that maybe we should not stop doing, but we need to coordinate them better. So the first thing is, if you're a woman and you go into business, you quickly figure out that people want you to change. They want you to be really tough, they want you to be really strong, they want you to be ambitious, but not too much, because then you're gonna, then somebody's not gonna like that. But they basically try to change you. I changed. I've been acting like a man for the past 20 years. Because it was just easier that way. And I was told by my first manager here in Silicon Valley, Eva, you never need to do business with anybody who makes you feel uncomfortable. And that phrase has followed me for 20 years, and I tell every single person that I meet about that. You never need to do business with anybody who makes you feel uncomfortable. Why? Well, because there's always somebody else around the corner who wants to do business with you. Walk away. It's fine. And so what power did that give me? Well, it empowered me, and it was the right thing to say to me. That doesn't mean that it's okay to say that to everybody. And we, as women role models, have to tune in and figure out what is the best thing to say to the young woman that we have in front of us. The other thing that's also been very convenient is just to keep the women silent. I mean, just kind of shove them in the corner and just, we don't need to listen to this. It's too complicated. That's another way to solve it. But the problem is now that women are speaking up and speaking out, is that the men are becoming silent. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually connect these two so that people start talking to each other again? Handing all the responsibility over to HR and diversity officers, we've heard about that. Them desperately trying to implement programs in one direction or another. And that's fine, as long as it's cooperation, and as long as the leadership is driving the effort, then you have somebody to fall back on. You all here are the experts. You are the community that I fall back on when I go out and I talk to these men that I usually address that work in operational roles or leadership roles inside organizations. And once again, touching upon that, the women talking to women, women's networks are absolutely necessary. We have to have them. There's no doubt in my mind. But women's networks without the communication and talking to men, that's not going to work. So in order to create this big movement that I'm requesting right now, the first thing that I don't hear when I hear everybody talking, because everybody's very focused and have very much expertise in their area, is a common vision. I would like all of us to share the vision of having 50% women at all levels of the organization as a reflection of the society that we live in. And if we all have that vision and we share that vision, then there's actually a chance that we know not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it as well. And we have 50% women in the workforce today. Not 50% of women, but 50% of the workforce is women. But they're not at leadership level. And so there needs to be a reflection at every level of the organization, not just at the bottom. I also believe that a lot of the issues that we have in the workplace when it comes to sexual harassment or abuse and bullying, all of these things, are actually a result of the imbalance. So if we get to 50-50, a lot of these things will not naturally dissolve, but there's going to be lesser of it because guys are going to be behaving better if it's 50% women in the meeting room. Then we have the whole topic of, guys don't want the women to be there, and what are we going to do with those guys? But we're not going to talk about them right now because they take up too much of my energy anyway. So with the shared vision, I think, what's in a movement? You need the vision, you need the why. I don't care why people do this. I don't care what their entry point is. Some people say, well, you can't, just because you have 4 daughters, that doesn't mean that you're, yes, it does. It doesn't matter. If you, as a man, or as a manager, a leader, a man or a woman, are actually saying, I'm going to do something about equality in our workplace because it's the right thing to do. I had a conversation with a guy like that the other day. He wanted to be on one of my panels, and I said, it's great. You have your foot in the door, you're starting to think the right way, but we still need to work with you a little bit more until you get to a little bit deeper level. But it's an entry point. Good, great. The economy, can we improve it? Can my company do better? Diversity of thought on teams, better decisions, all of this stuff. Great, that's also a good one. Or good old FOMO, fear of missing out. Shit, the competitors are taking all the good talent. What are they doing that I'm not doing? That one works very well as well. So apart from that, the leadership, or I should say the how and who, really takes us to the strategy and accountability for success. I want to call it the 50-50 movement. Our goal is to reach there by 2030. We all have to work together. And there's several different sort of subgroups, and you all belong to one or another of them. So listen up, maybe you kind of recognize yourself. We have the experts. We've heard from many of them today. They're fantastic. They need to help us collect data. They need to continue to do their research. They have to focus on intersectionality just as much as they're looking at what women are doing. They also have to stand up and talk about it just the way that they've been doing here today. And you have to reach outside of your comfort zone as far as communities go. You have to start going and talking at conferences where you would not normally step out and talk. It's scary as hell, I swear, but it's okay. I'm speaking here. You guys are all experts. It's okay, because the worlds need to meet. The tech sector has to meet the world of experts on sexual harassment and vice versa. The women sharing their stories, women role models are so important. I'm always looking up to women and always looking for more women role models. But remember that the women role models that are out there today, many of them are like me, strong and driven and have done the impossible. But you know what? There are other women out there that are not quite as loud, that are also excellent role models. Try to find them in your organization. Find them in your network. Talk to the person who doesn't look like you. I'm sure she knows something that you don't know. The Men Ally Movement. So grateful that you're here, Ray. Ray Arata, David Smith, both speaking after me. They're like my great role models when it comes to what guys are doing for guys. They talk to men. As men, they talk to men. And they talk to a certain category of men. They talk to the men that have already opened their ears. And it's fantastic. Then the target group that I work with the most, men in operational roles, line managers, leaders in organizations. I invite them in to be role models for the younger generation men. And I say, tell me what you are doing. Tell me what you have done. Specific examples of what you're doing for women in your organization. And it's amazing the amount of initiatives that are going on, but they're not seen. So we've got Annie back here, who does a fantastic podcast, and in the month of November, she had male ally stories every single day of the month. Then we have two groups of guys that are not here today. They're the guys that are on the edge, the ones that are thinking, oh my God, I know something is going on here. I got a daughter at home. I need to do something, but I don't really know what. We can bring those in. We can bring them in. And then we have what I call the convincible resistance. The men who think they don't care, it doesn't matter, it's just going to be trouble for me, it's just a pain, I don't really need to deal with these things. It is each and every one of yours job. Every single one of you have to find a man like that in your network, somebody who's resisting, somebody who doesn't get it. It's your job to talk to one man like that. Because if every single one of us talk to a man like that, well, look how many more we're going to get that are going to then walk on the edge, and then we'll pull them over. So the fear that the Me Too movement has created, that was mentioned here before, we have to reel these guys back in. We can't afford to lose them right now. I'm just going to bring up a couple, this is really hard to see, but basically creating equality in the workplace, leadership drive and demonstration. I called to get permission to say this. The CEO of Cloudera is a fantastic man. I've never met him, but I'm working with one of the VPs in their organization who's going to be on an upcoming panel that I'm moderating. He said, we're hiring for 2 VP positions. Nothing happened. So after a month, after 2 months, my friend who's a VP there, he walked in and he said, well, what's going on? Why aren't we hiring? It's starting to affect our business. And he said, no, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing. Just hang on. Somebody's going to be here. Another month goes by. My friend goes back in again. He said, what's going on? And the CEO says, I'm hiring 2 women. But what do you mean you're hiring 2 women? Well, we're going to wait until we have 2 women. And he said, well, you can't do that. And the CEO said, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. I have another friend, and so the story ends. They hired 1 woman and 1 man because they couldn't wait any longer. But I think that was a really, really nice and conscious effort. I have another friend who runs Telia Sonera in Sweden. Amazing woman. It's a telco company. And she has, during the 3 years that she's been there, managed to get 50% women on the leadership team and at all management levels. It's absolutely fantastic. Same thing there. Don't give me just resumes of men. Give me men and women. So that's something that they can do. The managers that follow and lead by example. So we heard how this training is not really working all that well. And that's okay. I think that there's a function for the training, but not as an isolated event. There's a man, his name is Gerard Brassard. He was a VP at HP for many years, and he's now over at Rackspace. He was talking to me about the importance of leading and setting an example. Yes, Eva, it takes much longer when I build these diverse teams to come to decisions. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, I have to look to each individual's need, but that's okay. Because once the group sees the positive results that that's had and the positive financial impacts that that's had, that work, then they will do the same thing when it's their time to become a manager. Measure and accountability. We have to measure, and we have to hold people accountable. None of this work will actually get any better until we start really showing financial results and showing statistically how we're moving things forward. I talked to a man who is, he's now the head of Salesforce in the Nordics, and he was at HP before that in the Nordics for 6 years. And during those 6 years, he was able to, he was driving the change, and they were able to get from 18% to 36% women at leadership level. And he said, I'm not going to do anything unless there are goals and we measure them. And that's just how he operates, and it works. Programs and processes, we touched upon that, and I'll get to some details on that. The one thing I want to say here is that programs and processes, by programs, I mean services and software solutions. And the time is now, people. Now. We have to make a change now. Because in 3 years from now, who knows what the economy is going to look like? Now is the time for every organization to implement programs and processes that make sure that we follow through. And I mean hiring, retention, promotion. But implement the programs now, because if they're not established and in the system, then in 3 years from now, everybody will just be dealing with something else. You know, they'll be figuring out how are we going to make enough money and revenues and this and that and the other, whatever it might be. And last but not least is the piece that I usually talk about when I speak to male audiences, the individual contribution. Every single one needs to understand and realize the power that they have to make a difference. You can make a difference in a person's life by talking to them. Every manager can talk about, or I should say every manager and every leader has the ability to influence a woman's life and her career just by words and actions. And everyone in the room and everyone that you work with need to understand and realize the power that they have. So I know I'm out of time. I'm not going to go through this chart, but I'm happy to talk to you about it. This is just a chart that I made that reflects the hiring, promotion, and retention buckets and in-house outsourced services and software products. The reason the red corner, there's a red corner down there, is because in the retention bucket, there is very few software products. And I'm basically calling out to all software people right now to please start making some more softwares in that space, because there's very, very few of them. So with that, as we're out of time, and we've got two amazing speakers coming up, I want to thank you. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm Eva Helen. Look at EQ Inspiration. That's my homepage. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me and for letting me be part of this amazing day. Thank you.
Helen, we have time for maybe one question.
Oh, okay.
Do we have a question from the audience at all? Oh, yes.
It's not exactly a question, it's a great statement. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yay.
Was asked the question, when will you be satisfied with equality in the Supreme Court? And she said, when all of us are. And someone said, oh, you're kidding, that's not equality. Nobody bats an eye when they're all men.
No, you're totally right. My son gave me the book, her biography, for Christmas, actually. When I talked last time to a room full of men, and I said 50-50, and two guys came up to me afterwards, and they said, well, Eva, is that really fair? I mean, do you mean like quota and stuff? I'm like, I don't know, whatever it takes, but that is fair. 50-50 is fair. All right, thank you.